Welcome back to the Anti-Meta Meta Club. This week's race C is once again Deep Forest and Group 3 cars, but since there's a new Bape, there's a new meta car, and that means there's a new anti-meta car. Let's get into it. This week's anti-meta car is the 4C. The 4C seems to be the car that is most like the meta car, but I think it actually has a bit of an advantage when it comes to tire wear, which definitely played a part in the race that I'm going to show you later. This car has gone through many ups and downs with all the different Bape changes over the years, but right now it's actually pretty fantastic. I managed to set a 126.3, putting me 49th place globally, and it put me as the fastest 4C, just barely edging out our friend Aleki, who is the one who suggested I use this car. I'm very glad that I listened to him, and as you can see by looking at the leaderboard, the RCZ is insanely dominant. Moving down the front straight, you're going to look for the meter boards, and the very first braking zone is right before the 100 meter board. As you downshift and decelerate through the gears, you want to make sure you turn in right about the 50 meter board, and I hit a late apex here, but I think you can actually go faster by turning in a little bit earlier, getting up on the curb, and doing kind of a long apex. Either way, I want you to exit in second gear, and be careful, the car will understeer a bit, so you've got to make sure that your car is rotated enough before you get on that throttle. As you go up this short hill, turn in before the end of the curb, and you're going to look for this sign that tells you to turn right, and right when you get to that sign, that's exactly what you're going to do. Turn in before lifting and lift just enough to make sure that you can get your right tires all the way up on this curb. If you're just left of the center of the track, you're actually going to be totally fine because this car can rotate. Right before you get to this concrete portion right here, you're going to hit the brakes a little bit, downshift to third, and then start turning in. You may have noticed I did it a little bit early, and that caused me to go over these sausage curbs right here in the middle of the curbing. This caused me to understeer and slide, but I somehow managed to save it, and it didn't actually affect my line too much. If you completely miss those, however, you'll be able to set yourself up better for the next corner. You should be to the left of the center of the track here. You can see I'm to the right because, as I mentioned before, I understeered, but again, this car rotates so quickly that it didn't actually affect my time that much. Before you get to the curb here on the right, you're going to brake, downshift to second, and try to get yourself all the way up on the inside curb right here. Exit in second gear and make sure you track out all the way up to the curb, but if you go past the curb, you can fit your car there and it will give you dirty tires and invalidate your lap. Using the end of the curb as a guide of when to turn in, you want to turn in first, and then right when you get to these black tire marks here on the left, you're going to start adding just a little bit of brakes. You want to get all the way onto the white line or just past it in second gear, up to third gear before accelerating, and then get on that throttle while still cornering. You want to actually continue steering to the right while you're on the throttle, but if you add too much steering, you will slide out. I want you to take note of this line. We don't really want to sacrifice for the left-hander. We just want to shoot all the way up to the inside wall right here and then trace the white line, setting up for the next corner right here. It's important to set yourself correctly for this next right-hander, so I like to make sure that I'm aiming fully to the left of the curb before then starting to turn in. Using both of these green bollards, you want to stay as close to both of them as you can and cut over the grass, making sure your left tires stay on the curb. When you get to the second one, that is when you add brakes. Immediately turn in, downshift to third, and when you get up on the curb, you should feel the car start to rotate. That is when you shift up to fourth gear and then add throttle. You should be able to stay full throttle until your next braking zone, which is when your entire car gets all the way onto this bridge, making sure your right tires are all the way up on the curb and not beyond it. Brake heavily down to second gear and turn in at the end of the bridge. Of course, you want to get all the way up onto this curb. You're going to get to third gear before getting on the throttle, and you want to get fully on that throttle. The secret to avoiding a penalty here is making sure that your left tires stay to the left of the white line except when you get to the curb. The curb becomes the outer limits of the line. And of course, it stops being that when you get to the end of the curb, so make sure you get all the way back on the pavement before then. It's important to note that you've got to rev this thing out all the way, but it has a really hard fuel cutoff pretty early on. I don't know what it is in kilometers per hour, but you can't go over 159 miles an hour in fifth gear. But of course, that's not an issue for this straight. About one car length before the curb here on the right, you want to hit the brakes. You can put your right tires all the way up on the curb, but if you put them past into the green, it's going to give you dirty tires and you're going to slide way out. Decelerate hard all the way down to first gear. You can start turning in a little bit before the end of the curb, but you want to make sure that you start trail braking at the end of it. I like to miss the inside curb and then heavily get on the throttle in second gear. You can get on that throttle really heavily in this car because it's really light and is mid-engine, and all that weight just hits those tires and it just takes off. Again, be mindful that you're revving it out, but you don't hit that fuel cutoff. If you hit the fuel cutoff, if you miss your shift, it will ruin your lap. Stay as close to these kinks as you can, and then after that final one, stay as far to the left as you can, because if you go to the right, it's just going to add distance, which adds time. I mentioned this a bit in the breakdown, but I kind of hit a late apex for this corner. I don't think that's necessary. I think it's actually much faster to get all the way up in the curb, make it like a long apex where you're just hugging the inside for a while and then exiting the same way. These triangular signs tell you exactly when and what direction to turn in here, which is kind of funny. This portion of the lap was actually the very worst. I think I probably lost at least a tenth, if not maybe even 2/10 here. I think you can go extremely fast with this car with a little bit more time. The white lines do seem to give you dirty tires and make you slip, but I don't know if it's not enough of an effect with this car or if it's just not that much of an effect at all for this track, or if it's just because of the new update, but it doesn't seem to affect it too much when you go up on the white line, especially for that really tight right-hander before. This exit is, of course, one of the most important exits, probably the second most important exit. You'll notice I got on the throttle before I hit the apex. If you can do anything to increase the length of time that you're wide open throttle without sacrificing too much of your mid-corner speed, then you can really reap the benefits of that full wide open throttle. It will really help you, especially in a track with an extremely long straight like this. And the same goes with that hairpin. As long as you don't lose a lot of speed on entrance or in the middle of a corner, getting on that throttle early and really extending these straights is very, very important. I keep saying this, but make sure you don't rev out too much, because if you hit the fuel cutoff, it's a really harsh cutoff and you'll lose way too much time. This race features a required pit stop. Actually, it's not a required pit stop technically, but it is a required tire change, and you can't do that without hitting a pit stop, obviously. So that does leave us with a little bit of strategy. Before we get into the race, I want to talk about the fact that I had not spent any time practicing with this car before doing this race. And the only reason I say that is because you might notice that my raw lap speeds were not that great, or lap times were not that great. I could probably go 5 to 6 tenths faster now that I've practiced, and that would make this car even more deadly against the RCZ. On top of having incredible raw pace, it's also very fast in the slip. It brakes incredibly well because it doesn't weigh anything, and because of that, the tire wear is phenomenal, which you're going to see when you watch this race. For most cars, I would suggest doing 6 or 7 laps on the hards, leaving 7 to 8 laps on the mediums. For heavier cars, I would suggest at least 7 laps, because your tires will melt by the end unless you're really, really trying to get really good track position and you're confident with your ability to defend while on worn tires. But with all of that said, there are options. You do have a pit window. I think it's probably safe to pit anywhere between lap 5 and 8, assuming that you're starting on the hard compound. Deep Forest is known to be pretty sketchy. As you can see, we already have a big incident, and I paid the ultimate price for it. That guy Nim went off, turned sideways, and the ghosting did not work, which seems to be kind of a bigger issue lately. But after being pushed all the way to second last place, it was kind of like starting the race all over, and in fact, I still had damage. So I still wasn't able to really push and try to keep up with the rest of the crowd. At this point, I wasn't quite sold on the car, obviously, because I hadn't really driven it at all, but I hadn't really considered how good it was going to be on the tires. I knew it was going to be good on the tires. The Alpha is always very good on tires because, like I keep saying, it doesn't really weigh anything at all. I think it's one of the lightest cars, even after Bape, and it is built to be light. So I don't know if that actually affects anything, to be quite honest. I don't know how much adding the ballast would affect the suspension geometry and the setup, but it does seem to work really well when it comes to tire wear. That particular incident, I'm not actually sure this is what happened, but what I see a lot of is people giving half space or only kind of giving space, pushing people all the way so that their tires are just barely on the curb. And while that is technically still pretty clean, one issue with that is people are going to be sliding their tires coming out of that corner. And if they're sliding their tires and also on the curb, it's going to make them very likely to spin out. And if they spin out next to you, they're probably going to take you out. So besides the fact that it is just good sportsmanship to leave ample space and make sure you're not pushing people all the way to the ragged limits, it's also safer for both of you. Since I got pushed so far to the back and the people that were directly in front of me both took each other out, it was a long time before I saw anyone, and then we got to see our friend 51 Driver. It's been quite a long time since I've seen him on track. I want to give a quick shout out to him. I've been racing him for years, and I believe it was just in the middle of last year. The poor guy suffered a heart attack, but luckily he's back and he is racing again. It is wonderful to see you, 51 Driver, and I'm sorry that I'm saying all of this, as I have to mention If you touch the inside grass, it is an easy way to make yourself slide out. So be very careful on the inside. Make sure that you don't cut it too much. But either way, it's good to see a 51 driver. Once again, because of what happened at the beginning of the race, we saw almost no one until the end of the 4th lap. Now, Juan didn't actually do any of this. I'm only mentioning this because it happens pretty frequently. People serve that penalty there and then they misjudge their braking because they think they can brake a lot later, and that is not the case. Make sure you brake pretty close to where you would usually brake, or else you might end up running into people, which is what happened to me something like 8 times in one of my first races. Now, I want you to take note that I was actually 1.5 seconds behind this group of 3 drivers, and by the end of this lap, we found ourselves within less than a second. And I knew that if I stayed behind them, I'd have to battle them somewhere in the next lap, so I decided to take advantage of this car's fantastic tire wear and go in the pits very early. After going the pits very early at the end of lap 5, we now go to the beginning of lap 8 when everyone should have gone to the pits, and you can see how effective my undercut was. We are now in 7th place. We didn't have to do anything except drive completely by ourselves to pass 3 people without having to battle them whatsoever. I believe the undercut makes sense to most people watching this. If any of you don't understand how it is we managed to pass people without actually having to pass them on track, please let me know and I'm going to try to come up with a much better explanation. But essentially, everyone has to go in the pits, and when you go in the pits before everyone else does, you don't have to worry about battling them, and it doesn't matter how fast they're going because they can't impede you since they're essentially just doing it at a different time. By going from a slower compound to a softer compound, softer being faster, it really accentuates the effect of the undercut because when they're out for a longer stint on the slower compound, you're on a longer stint on the faster compound, and again, it just accentuates exactly how good the undercut is. Now, as you saw, the very fast Velosa came out of the pits in front of us, so if we're to pass him, we're going to have to do it on track the old-fashioned way. And the people in front of him also have gone through the pits, so we've got our work cut out for us if we're going to try to pass anyone else. Now, since he's a very quick driver and he had the slipstream, I wasn't able to get very close at all until pretty much a full lap later, and at that point, he'd unfortunately gotten himself a penalty, despite the fact that he did pass Victor, so that pass ended up meaning nothing. I don't actually know why I hit the wall there. I think I just wasn't paying attention, but luckily it didn't give me a penalty or damage or slow me down too much. Now this right here would end up being the ultimate test. We've got the meta car directly in front of us and we're in their slipstream. So the ultimate test would be to see if we can actually pull up beside him and make an effective move on the meta car. This kind of thing can obviously be very complicated when you have another car behind, and I did not realize how good the Ferrari was in the slipstream. I thought the Alfa would be much better, but it turns out the Ferrari is even stronger than the Alfa. One of the benefits of the Alfa is even when you have the overspeed, you can still brake really deeply into the corner, and if you have a pinch line because someone's on your outside, you can still maintain pretty much the same speed as them. Like I mentioned in the intro of this video, it seems like the Alfa and the RCZ are very, very similar, and I don't know if I've ever raced against this Victor guy, but he gave me so much space that it was actually really cool being able to race against him side by side for that long. I don't know who you are, Victor, but you are fantastic, and I absolutely love that. I was able to maintain the advantage, get all the way in front, and Velosa actually ended up following me through. If you are a veteran of my series, if you've been here for a while, then you've probably heard me talk about this 1,000 times, but I really like the different strategies that you can employ just on the racetrack itself. If you choose to bump draft someone down the straight, then both of you are going to end up going faster. He gets the overspeed, and then I benefit from the push as well, and that can save both of us from an attack from a third party. Since Victor was close enough to potentially put a move on one of us, if we were to battle, Victor could potentially pass both of us. Instead, since Velosa pushed me, we were both able to not only stay away from Victor, but also pull away from him. Now, don't mistake this for an entirely altruistic move. He's trying to push me away so we can both potentially attack the people ahead as well as get away from the people behind, but at the end of the race, anything goes, and you better believe he's going to continue attacking at the end. Jumping all the way to the end, or close to the end, of lap 12, you can see that we did end up catching B-Go. What I hadn't realized just yet is that Amaya was right behind Velosa, so a fourth party comes into play. Amaya is also known as Aleki. He's the one who really suggested I drove the 4C, and he's also currently the second fastest 4C on the leaderboard. I'm not quite sure what Velosa would have done if he didn't get that penalty. I assume he might have actually pushed Bigo, getting us both next to each other so then he could attack both of us. But what ended up happening is he got that penalty and I was able to pass Bigo here. Now, alliances can be formed and lost at the drop of a hat, and you really have to think on your toes. I wasn't quite sure what Bigo was going to do, especially because I think one of them bumped him, and if he were to pass me, he could potentially stay all the way in front of me, but instead, he gave me the bump, which I do believe protected him at least for the time being. Despite the fact that he did start defending at least a little bit going into this first corner, Amaya ended up attacking, and so that slowed all of them down, letting me run away at least for the time being. Jumping to the end of that lap, Amaya had fully caught up to me. And at this point, he'd spent a lot of time racing with his car. I'm not trying to make excuses, but honestly, he's just faster than me in this car. Now that I've actually practiced with this car, if I had a better strategy, I think I could at least go toe-to-toe with him, but he is fantastic in this car. So that made me have to think of what exactly I wanted to do. If I decided to defend on the inside, it would probably slow both of us down. So instead, I just stayed on the outside, let him make a move, and I was just going to hope that Velasa wasn't going to be able to follow him through here. I was really worried as soon as I saw Velasa move to the inside that he was going to be able to pull off that vacuum pass that I talk about. When someone passes you on the inside, if you stay close enough to that person who is passing someone, then they can't possibly move into that line. But luckily I was able to stay just far ahead to stay all the way in front of him and just stay on Amaya's tail. Now this is a good time to talk about the tire wear of this car. At this point, I was 9 laps in to these tires and I still had more than 50% tire life. When I pit, I believe on lap 6 with the RCF, I think I had 30% tire life at the end of the race. So it just goes to show you, this car, like I keep saying, is incredible on the tires. And because of that, despite the fact that I had a massive undercut, we found ourselves battling for 5th place with another one of the 4Cs and a Ferrari. And the tires were still just absolutely fine. We're still in the 27s on the mediums at the end of the stint. And like I showed you before, the Ferrari is incredible in the slipstream. What I wanted to do here was just take the normal line, make sure I can get a really good exit, and then hopefully because of having Amaya's slipstream, I'd be able to avoid allowing the Ferrari to pass. And I guess you'll see exactly what happened. In GT7, if you stay on the outside here, it can make it so it's harder to get the slipstream, but of course then I wouldn't have slipstream from Amaya, and then he'd be able to get it and possibly get in front. But because I was able to stay just right behind Amaya, I was able to stay all the way in front of the Ferrari. I think if Amaya was not there, I would have lost that position. But of course, if he wasn't there, then I'd have that position anyways. But either way, it was a fantastic race. Good racing Amaya, good racing Velasa. I really enjoyed that one. And I love the fact that even though I did get passed on track, it was by another one of the anti-meta cars. So it really goes to show exactly how good this car is as an anti-meta car. Thank you for watching my video. If you liked what you saw, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And of course, I'll be making another one of these guides next week. To finish off, I'm going to leave you with a look at my current members. I love every one of you. Thank you.